Well, the political journey of Mosiuoa Lekota, from his early days in student politics through imprisonment on Robben Island, his role in the UDF and the ANC, as well as his time in government, the formation of COPE in the late 2000s, and ultimately this morning, his passing at the age of 77. Let's reflect then on the life and times of Mosiuoa Lekota. We're joined by SABC News Specialist Correspondent Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, and you covered Terror Lekota for much of the democratic dispensation from the 90s. The president, despite their rocky relationship at times, describing him as a freedom fighter and a servant of the people. Let's reflect for a moment on Lekota's introduction to politics and his activism in the 70s and the 80s.
Well, many people have touched on his activism, starting from student politics to UDF, black consciousness, because people should be aware that before he joined the ANC, he was belonging to other movements in terms of the liberation struggle. But he was recruited to join the ANC by some of the very senior high-profile stalwarts of the ANC when he was in Robben Island. And we know that he then, after imprisonment, went back and he continued with activism, strengthening the UDF as someone who crisscrossed the country to mobilize. He was a good coordinator. He was good at mobilization. He was an orator. When you took to the podium, you would listen to him. And then the conference in Durban post-exile years when parties were unbanned. Who can forget that conference when you look at the archives, when he stood up there challenging some of the proposals that were put forward at that Durban conference in the presence of O.R. Tambo, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and at that time he was still much younger and very vibrant. And after 1994, this is what happened. For him to be the premier of Free State, he was a bit reluctant. The Free State, ANC at that time, under very young leadership of people like Popet Matosa, Ace Mahashule and them, felt that they wanted a more senior person to be a premier candidate for the province. Because when you look at a province like Limpopo, they had Mwako Ramasodi, Advocate Mwako Ramasodi, a high-profile person who was in exile. When you look at Mpumalanga, they had someone like Matthew Sposa, high-profile. You look at Northwest, they had someone with high-profile, Popo Molefe. Gauteng, they had Tokyo Sekwale. KZN was under ISP. Western Cape, it wasn't under the ANC. Northern Cape had Mani Dipitu. And therefore, they requested that Terror be deployed to be the premier of the Free State. That's how he became the premier. But along the way, there was a fallout with the provincial leadership on many issues. His argument was that they are doing things the wrong way. And on the other hand, the ANC, the Free State, felt that he has to take directives from the party. And remember, this man was a national figure. So there was that kind of tension all the time until the ANC National Committee took a decision to move him out of the province and Mahashule also out of the province. They brought him Kasabru. That's when he became the chairperson of the NCOP, the first chairperson of the NCOP. And later, former President Mbeki appointed him to be the defense minister. The deployment of troops in the DRC, many times we accompanied him as journalists when he was visiting troops in the DRC. He was very feisty. When he believed in something, he would stand up, and irrespective of your feeling or your view, he was a straight talker. The Polokwane conference was one of the turning points because after Polokwane conference, I did an exclusive interview with him where he expressed his disappointment in terms of the trajectory the ANC was taking. He felt that it was not going to be business as usual as it relates to the future ANC. And therefore, I felt at that moment that something was happening. And then later, at some point in time, I was home on holiday. Then I got a call from somebody, a journalist in the print media, who asked me, did you hear that there's a group of ANC that wants to form a party? Then I said, no, I didn't know. Then they said, no, it's Mosiuoa Lekota and the others, because I knew him. Then I called him and he confirmed, and that's how we covered Pope, and most of the time being assigned because of I was able to get stories behind stories. The launch or the first convention at here in Johannesburg, Santin Convention Center, very difficult because at that time it was not fashionable to leave the ANC. Some members of the ANC destabilized them. And, there was that problem. And then later when they had their first conference in Bloemfontein again, some ANC members worked hard to destabilize them because you know that on the 16th of December, that's when there's a commemoration of the launch of MK. And ANC took a decision to have a launch in Bloemfontein where they were having a conference. And therefore, it became very difficult to share resources as you cover stories. So it wasn't an easy road for the launch of that party that was led by Mosiuoa and also Terror Lekota, because it was not fashionable to start a political party. Today, people do start political parties. Nobody is destabilizing your meetings. Nobody is doing anything. We live in a free political environment right now. But for them, it was very, very difficult. Until his twilight days, when he left the party, after the party didn't perform well in the previous elections. And the last time I spoke to him, he indicated that he was not well. And it's no surprise that perhaps that illness took most of his energy and strength. And but the reality is, you look at the statement of the ANC, you can see that this is the man who played a prominent role. And the ANC almost claiming him back, not begging, but to say we may not be in the same party before he left, but we cannot forget his role. And you would recall that he was very, very instrumental in the Liberation Organization, and he was very, very close to Nelson Mandela. Even him in the top 6 of the ANC as the leader. I remember the Stellenbosch conference. People were pushing that he must challenge Jacob Zuma as the deputy president of the ANC. But some ANC people spoke to him, don't challenge David, you'll divide the party. But SACP and COSATU were pushing that he must challenge the position of the deputy president in Stellenbosch, because they, the alliance partners, SACP and COSATU, had a different view in terms of policies of ANC, which they characterize as neoliberal. And they thought that maybe Terra can grow up in the ranks and come up with a different approach. So all parties, it's no surprise today they are issuing statements. He contributed to the liberation of this country.
SABC News Specialist Correspondent Sophie Mokoena, who covered the life of Terror Lekota in active politics for much of the 90s, all the way until as recently as when he was last active in politics just before the 2024 general election.